Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. I am here to review Dark Shadows, episode number 97. This is written by Francis Swan, directed by Leila Swift. So, you have Vicky, who is back from Bangor, Maine. She doesn't know quite what to say to the Collins family because, again, has she been defending Burke? I would say more Carolyn's been defending Burke. I think Victoria has tried to remain neutral about the subject between Burke and the Collins family. She had not looked at Burke as a murderer or somebody who could kill, or didn't want to see maybe necessarily the bad in the man. She understood he didn't like the Collins family, but she also is an adult. She understands not everybody likes everybody. In Bangor, you learn Vicky, I should say more importantly, by the end of her Bangor trip, she feels Burke is the one responsible for Bill Malloy's death. Now, we know as the audience that's not true, but the writers have written Victoria as it's all about we here on this channel, and by we I mean me, Gordon, and Patrick, we've talked about many shows. And one of the shows we've talked about is The Prisoner. And The Prisoner is all about getting what? Information. And I think that's one of the most important things about television shows when you're watching them. When you're looking at the characters for a TV show like Dark Shadows, it's about what information do they know about the people around them and the things they've seen people carry or use. I talked about this in my last video, but I feel it's important to discuss it here as well. Who did she last, where did Vicky see the pen? Where did she find it? At Beneath Lookout Point, where Bill Malloy died. Who does she know had a pen like this? Burke Devlin. And you could say, what about Carolyn? What about this? Again, audiences are always made to feel, or they should be, especially when it comes to horror matters of protagonist versus an antagonist. But not everything is just related to horror. It's related to sometimes mysteries like this. Our information is irrelevant because we're spectators. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. Us knowing who had the pen first and who it was given to, we know whose pen that was, who it was given to. So you have to put yourself back in Vicky's shoes. She does not. It's easy. Sometimes I feel it's too easy to be an audience member and go, well, Vicky's stupid for not knowing this. No, she's not. Not at all. Doesn't make her character stupid. Characters are often made to feel vulnerable out of their own pure ignorance, and in a good way. It's called protecting the character from either knowing something you don't want them to know or knowing too much. You have Victoria Winters, who doesn't know that Burke Devlin gave Carolyn that pen, who doesn't know that Roger took that pen from Carolyn, who doesn't know that it was Roger who lost that pen. Again, it's all about Vicky's lack of information. The only information Victoria Winters has about that pen is one, there are 5 like it, and Burke Devlin had one, and his lawyer has another. Now, that's all she knows. And from who had it. What she knows about that pen was she found it at Lookout Point, where Bill Malloy died. So her 2 and 2 put together is, well, Burke had one of those pens. Perhaps Burke killed Bill Malloy. It's not dumbing down a character if they feel a certain way because they don't have enough information and they only have a certain amount of information. All great protagonists presume something. Want a bigger of suggestion? Okay. If you're a fan of Halloween, the Halloween franchise like I am, and you've seen the original, which I'm sure you have, what makes Laurie Strode so vulnerable to Michael Myers? In fact, not just Laurie Strode, Annie Brackett, Linda Vanderklok, and Bob Sims. What makes them vulnerable to Michael Myers isn't just the fact that he's on the loose. Outside of Dr. Sam Loomis, the sheriff, and a small handful of the sheriff's men, only they know about it. Meaning the sheriff, Dr. Loomis, and a handful of the sheriff's men. They know Michael's on the loose. Now, the sheriff doesn't necessarily believe Michael's in town because he hasn't seen him. He hasn't seen that he's in town. Now, neither is Loomis. Loomis hasn't seen him. He's seen hints that he's most likely around. The taking of Judith Margaret Myers' headstone, the dead dog at the Myers house, Loomis believes he's there. Hell, Loomis believes he's there before he sees those things because he also saw a body at outside of town. My point I'm making here is the town of Haddonfield isn't stupid. They just don't have the information you and I have as an audience goer. Their characters in a story, John Carpenter is protecting them by not giving them information. We might say, well, how is John Carpenter or even the writers of Dark Shadows protecting somebody when they're not giving full information? It's very simple. Ignorance is bliss. Okay? If Laurie Strode knew, or Annie Brackett or Linda Vanderklok knew about Michael Myers, do you think they're going to go out babysitting? Do you think they're going to leave their doors unlocked? No, probably not. That's another thing. When you get into Dark Shadows too, you have characters who aren't always informed on every little thing that goes on. Not everybody is a member of the Collins family. Remember, Victoria knew Bert Devlin arrived in Collinwood before Roger and Elizabeth did. Why'd she know that? So, in turn, does that make Elizabeth and Roger stupid? No, it does not. So why do we give Vicky that label when she doesn't know something? I feel sometimes we take character matters too seriously when we're not really stepping back and evaluating the character within the episode or what kind of information the character may or may not have. It's not just what the character knows, you have to include what the character doesn't know. The character does not know who the pen was ever given to. How many hands have actually touched that pen? Remember, this is a woman who accused David of taking the pen. David didn't take the pen. But Vicky isn't considering how many other hands touched that pen. And she's not wrong for doing that. She's panicked. This is a woman who not too terribly long ago saw a ghost, and that ghost told her, you will be killed. You will die in Collinsport too if you don't leave. I'm also going to get into the lineage of Victoria Winters here because they get into that here in this episode too. You have Vicky coming down into the drawing room, and she does tell her Carolyn's still jealous of her for going to Bangor with Burke. Elizabeth sends Roger and Carolyn out the room. Roger says, "Oh, Liz, don't be too hard on her." And Liz, "Oh, I'll handle things my own way." And Roger's like, "Okay." Um, yeah, he really put up a fight, didn't he? Again, Roger. I also love the conversation between Roger and Liz later on. You also have this conversation between Elizabeth and Vicky, which is really well done. Vicky is not so timid anymore. She's kind of standing her ground here. She explains why Burke gave her a ride very easily. She also doesn't want to get into why she phoned why she phoned Roger to come get her. And Elizabeth actually accepts that answer. She doesn't pry it, she doesn't push for it. And here's what I take away most of this episode. Is Vicky honestly for certain Burke's a murderer? If you were for I would say she wants to believe it, but she also keeps in mind Roger has asked her not to mention this. And I feel Vicky is trying to appease Roger a bit too much in this episode. You should never appease Roger. Oh my God. So I also love the conversation you get with Carolyn and Vicky in the foyer. Vicky is warning Carolyn, you should stay away from Burke. And Carolyn, again, is still jealous. And you see they're arguing in the foyer. And Carolyn says, "Don't you realize your actions affect this family?" And Vicky fires back, "Oh, and your actions don't?" And Carolyn marches upstairs angry. Vicky's not putting up with it. Victoria Winters goes to the Evans cottage to look at the portrait, really more so of Betty Hanscom, who looks exactly like her. Obviously, this is a portrait of Alexandra. Now, I will say that there's much debate about, is Vicky Liz's daughter? Now, we all heard the confession Joan Bennett made, which is fun. Joan Bennett, man, what an actress! There's an interview that was given where Joan Bennett, as speaking as Elizabeth, said Victoria Winters was indeed my daughter, which is a lot. Now that's not canon, by the way. That's not canon. I wish it were, but it's not a canon thing. We can't count it, though. It's a fun interview to go watch. Alexandra is a really talented actress. You have to understand that during auditions, Joan Bennett had come down to see how things were going, and she spotted Alexandra and had thought that one of her daughters was auditioning. That Alexandra in her, looked so much like a younger version of Joan. And you can see that. You can see a resemblance of Joan and Alexandra a bit. It's there. Just from a posture standpoint, a look standpoint, it's there. So Alexandra got the role for that reason. She's a talented actress. She knows how to scream. She knows how to, um, block. She pose her body. Very talented actress. So at the Evans cottage, by the way, that's what you get here. You get Collinwood, you get the foyer, the drawing room, and you get the Evans cottage. You get Evans cottage here. Now, Sam Evans, you also learn a bit about Sam Evans in this episode. you learn that Sam Evans is not initially from Collinsport. He's from Connecticut. That he talks about the natives of Collinsport. He's not really a native of Collinsport. He's not from there, is what you learn. And I think that's a big deal of how he has always said him and his wife kept to themselves, and so him and Maggie have always kept to themselves. Maggie is a little more of a social butterfly. Now, Sam talks to people, but he doesn't try to intervene with people's lives either, at least not deliberately. We all know what happened with Sam and Burke and stuff. Remember, Burke used to pose for Sam Evans. Sam Evans is an artist, a painter. He posed for quarters. I wonder how many poses he actually did. It never says. But in this episode, Vicky is looking at the portrait of Betty Hanscom, and Sam Evans gives it to her as a gift. Now, back in Collinwood, you have a very interesting conversation. Roger says to Liz, we haven't made her feel very welcome. I know I haven't been much help. I haven't been too great at that. I haven't been very helpful with that. And she goes, you've changed your mind? He says, no, I haven't changed my mind. Meaning, in the previous episode, you saw Roger tell Vicky she should go home. He still feels the way he's always felt. Vicky should just go back to New York. Vicky should not be here. He feels that, yes, Vicky is... Does he feel... He doesn't want Vicky caught in the middle of Burke and the family. But you got to understand, there's a big but to this. Roger is still thinking about himself here. He still wants David out the house. He feels if he can get rid of Victoria, because anytime I've gone back and watched these, and going back even now, I still feel this way. I always felt that if Roger got rid of Victoria Winters, that would have been the final governess Elizabeth would have reached out to. She wouldn't have reached out to anybody else. That if he could get Vicky away or drive her away or find ways to get her to leave, that it would give him all the excuse in the world to send David away to a private school. And that's how I've always felt when watching these, even when I first watched this. And I feel more strongly that way than I ever have. Because you can tell there's this whole underlying thing of Roger wants to get rid of his son. He wants to get David away from the house, away from Collinwood, away from him. He never wanted the responsibility of being a dad. Now, eventually he grows up a bit here. Not in this episode, but eventually. So Vicky, who looks like Betty Hanscom, brings the portrait to Collinwood. Now, Roger has not seen this portrait, neither has Elizabeth. Elizabeth even says this before Vicky brings the portrait in. Vicky has the portrait wrapped up. She pulls it out and she says, doesn't this look like me? And Elizabeth says no. Roger lies. He says no. Elizabeth says that I think that Mr. Evans and Sam and Maggie were just being kind to you. They were just saying what you sort of wanted them to say. They could tell you were thinking it. And she goes, you really think that? And she goes, yes, I do. In walks Carolyn. Remember, Carolyn and Vicky this is a great reveal. Vicky and Carolyn had been arguing sort of this episode. Vicky turns toward Carolyn with the portrait in hand. Carolyn, Vicky, when did you get the portrait done? This looks just like you. Dun, dun, dun. And you see Roger and Elizabeth's face. So let's get into Vicky's lineage, shall we? How do the writers address her lineage after this? Now, they never address the portrait ever again. In fact, the portrait sort of magically goes back to Sam Sam Evans cottage. You'll see it in later episodes. It's just there. Vicky doesn't have it anymore. It's never addressed again. This is sort of where some Dark Shadows fans get miffed. It's like they never follow this up in a way of the portrait. So what do they do to address her lineage? Why, my dear fellows and folks, they hint that she's a Collins. What else? Okay, to be clear, to be a lot more transparent, Victoria Winters is going to eventually be kidnapped by Matthew Morgan. And she's locked in a secret room in the old house. She's behind a bookcase. And the ghost of Josette Dupre Collins appears to Victoria Winters, tells her it'll be okay, she'll be safe. And, the widows and Bill Malloy murder Matthew Morgan. Some ghost murder Matthew Morgan's ass. But Josette came to Victoria in her hour of need, her hour of help. And what you hear in the following episode, after that episode, and I'll get into this when I get to the episodes, Elizabeth says that a woman in white helped her aunt, or helped her, I believe, and the woman was Josette, that this woman would always help a Collins. Well, that's Josette. Josette Dupre Collins helped. Josette helped Vicky. Well, she came to me. She helped me. And she goes, what if I'm related to Josette? And Elizabeth said, well, that would make you a Collins. Now, I'm going to add a caveat to this. It would make you a Collins because, one, Josette was married to a Collins. Now, historically, Josette was married to Jeremiah. I'm gonna shatter a lot of worlds here who don't know. Josette never had any kids that we know of. Okay, so that isn't happening. This is sort of later recycled in the revival. In a way, where instead of saying Vicky is related to Josette, they just make Vicky Josette. Vicky is the reincarnation of Josette. So there you go. This is a really fun episode. I'll leave a link in the description box. Do I love that they never really address the portrait again? No, I don't, because you still see the portrait in later episodes. But I don't feel how it's handled is completely bad. They just don't look. They're going away from Vicky's lineage and getting more into some more supernatural elements, stuff they've already hinted. They're trying to wrap up they're still going to Bill Malloy's murder mystery. So, and who did it? You also, by the way, the next episode, you also have Mrs. Johnson is finally going to start working at Collinwood. So, and spying for Burke Devlin. So there's that. All right. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Link to this episode will be in the description box. I hope you have a very, very lovely day.